The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with the late afternoon breeze as I watched 3 police cruisers pull up to my property. Through the wisps of smoke from our grills, I could see the officers stepping out, their expressions serious as they approached our gathering by the pond. My neighbors froze mid-conversation, burgers forgotten on their plates, children's laughter dying into nervous whispers. But I simply smiled and reached for the folder I'd been keeping on the picnic table for the past 3 weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. 9 minutes. That's all it took to completely dismantle Karen Thornberry's reign of terror over our neighborhood. 9 minutes to watch her smug expression crumble into disbelief, then panic, then something I can only describe as pure defeat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain how Oak Ridge Estate's most notorious HOA president learned that sometimes, the land you think you control has a way of reminding you who really owns it. My name is David Parsons, and I inherited 40 acres of prime land from my grandfather 15 years ago. The property includes a beautiful 3-acre pond that's been in our family for 4 generations. When Grandpa passed, he left me not just the land, but boxes of documents dating back to 1892 when his great-grandfather first purchased it. I built my house on the eastern portion, keeping the pond and surrounding areas as a natural preserve that I've always shared with neighbors who appreciate its beauty. 10 years ago, Oak Ridge Estates expanded, and somehow, through what I now realize was either incompetence or deliberate deception, the HOA claimed my pond area fell within their jurisdiction. I was busy with my consulting business at the time and didn't pay much attention to their newsletters or meetings. I never signed their covenant agreements, never paid dues, and honestly forgot they even existed until Karen Thornberry was elected president 6 months ago. Karen moved to Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago from somewhere up north, drawn by what she called the potential for proper community standards. Standing at 5'2" with perpetually pursed lips and a clipboard that seemed surgically attached to her arm, she transformed our peaceful neighborhood into what felt like a minimum security prison. Grass height infractions, mailbox color violations, and my personal favorite, a mandate that all outdoor gatherings required HOA approval with 48 hours notice. The first time Karen marched onto my property, I was teaching my nephew how to fish. She stood at the edge of the pond, designer heels sinking into the soft earth, waving a laminated copy of HOA bylaws. She informed me with a triumphant tone that all aquatic features needed to be registered with the HOA and that fishing required a permit from her personally signed committee. I politely told her this was private property. She scoffed and said everything within Oak Ridge Estates fell under HOA governance. That night, I dug out Grandpa's boxes. What I found made me laugh out loud. Not only did I own the pond and surrounding 20 acres free and clear, but the original survey showed that Oak Ridge Estates HOA had been using about 2 acres of my land for their community walking path, without permission or payment for the past decade. I consulted with my lawyer friend, James Morrison, who confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had no legal claim to my property whatsoever. I could have confronted them immediately, but James suggested waiting. He said with an amused tone, "Let them dig their own grave. Document everything." So I did. Every time Karen trespassed, every threatening letter about violations, every time she stood at my property line with her phone, recording my infractions, I documented it all. 3 weeks ago, she sent a formal notice threatening legal action if I didn't comply with HOA regulations. That's when I decided to throw a barbecue. The Memorial Day Pond barbecue invitation went out to all my actual neighbors, not through HOA channels, but personal invitations to the 30 families I'd known for years. I made it clear this was a private event on private property. 25 families RSVP'd yes, eager for a Karen-free afternoon. I hired a local barbecue truck, set up tables and chairs, and even brought in a small sound system for background music. Everything was perfectly legal and well within county noise ordinances. The party started at 2 p.m. on a beautiful Saturday. Kids were splashing in the shallow end of the pond, adults were enjoying cold drinks and great food, and for the first time in months, our neighborhood felt like a community again. That's when Hurricane Karen arrived. She stormed through the gathering crowd, her face red with rage, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She shouted over the music that this gathering was not approved and violated at least 17 HOA regulations. I calmly offered her a burger. This seemed to break something in her brain. She sputtered for a moment before launching into a tirade about permits, quiet hours, which didn't start until 10 p.m., and something about commercial food vendors. When I continued to smile and suggested she was welcome to join us as my guest, she pulled out her phone with a vindictive smile. She announced loudly enough for everyone to hear that she was calling the police for an illegal gathering, noise violations, and unpermitted commercial activity. While we waited for the police, Karen stood at what she believed was the HOA property line, arms crossed, occasionally shouting legal threats at anyone who made eye contact. The party continued, though with an underlying tension. Some neighbors started to pack up their things, worried about police involvement. I told everyone to relax and quietly retrieved my folder from inside. James had prepared everything meticulously: original deeds, surveys, tax records, and a beautifully drafted cease and desist letter. The first officer to approach was Sergeant Wallace, a tall man with kind eyes who I'd actually met before at community events. He walked up to me first, probably because I was calmly flipping burgers while Karen was practically vibrating with rage behind him. He asked with a professional tone if I was the property owner and what seemed to be the issue. I explained that we were having a private gathering on my property and that the HOA president believed she had jurisdiction here. I handed him the folder. As Sergeant Wallace looked through the documents, 2 other officers were taking Karen's statement. I could hear her angry voice carrying across the yard, throwing around terms like criminal trespass and public nuisance. The sergeant's expression changed as he read through the papers. He called over Officer Bennett, and they spent a few minutes comparing the survey maps to something on their patrol car's computer. The transformation was remarkable. Sergeant Wallace walked back to where Karen was still ranting to the other officers and had a quiet word with them. Then he approached Karen directly. I couldn't hear the initial exchange, but I saw the exact moment her smugness evaporated. Her mouth fell open, she shook her head violently, and then her voice rose to a pitch that probably disturbed dogs 3 neighborhoods over. She screamed that this was impossible, that the HOA had authority here. Sergeant Wallace returned to me with the other officers. He confirmed that according to all official records, not only was the pond and surrounding area my private property, but the HOA had been trespassing on my land for years. He asked with a slightly amused tone if I wanted to press charges for trespassing or harassment. I said not at this time, but handed him the cease and desist letter to serve as a witness. Karen tried to storm over but was politely blocked by Officer Bennett. What happened next was beautiful. Sergeant Wallace officially served Karen with the cease and desist letter, reading key portions aloud. The letter demanded that the HOA immediately stop claiming authority over my property, remove any HOA markers or signs from my land within 7 days, and cease all harassment. It also noted that the walking path the HOA had been using was on my property, and that continued use would require a formal easement agreement. Karen's face cycled through several colors: red, white, purple, and finally a concerning gray. She sputtered about lawyers, about her authority, about how this was impossible. The officers informed her that filing a false police report was a misdemeanor and suggested she leave the property immediately. As she turned to go, she shouted that this wasn't over, that the HOA would sue me into bankruptcy. Sergeant Wallace quietly reminded her that harassment was also a crime. The rest of the barbecue was spectacular. Word spread quickly through the gathering, and suddenly everyone was asking to see the surveys. My neighbor Tom, who'd been fined $300 for having the wrong shade of beige on his mailbox, actually started crying with joy. The music seemed louder, the food tasted better, and kids who'd been afraid to play too loudly were now having cannonball contests in the pond. 3 days later, I received an emergency letter from the HOA's lawyer attempting to dispute the property lines. James responded with a comprehensive package that included not only our documents but also a calculation of 10 years of unauthorized use of my land. The monetary value was substantial. He also included photos of Karen's multiple trespassing incidents and transcripts of her threats. The HOA's lawyer withdrew the challenge within 48 hours. The emergency HOA meeting the following Tuesday was standing room only. I didn't attend, I wasn't a member after all, but Tom gave me a play-by-play. Karen tried to spin the situation, claiming she was protecting the community's interests. When the board treasurer revealed that fighting the property dispute could cost the HOA over $200,000 in legal fees alone, not counting potential damages for trespassing, the room erupted. Homeowners who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. The vote of no confidence was swift and brutal. 38-2. Karen's only supporters were her vice president and a woman who everyone suspected was her sister. As the results were read, Karen stood up, her face twisted with rage, and declared that we were all going to regret this, that she knew people, that she would make our lives miserable. The board president pro tem quietly reminded her that threats during an official meeting were being recorded and could be used as evidence. But the real justice came 2 weeks later. Turns out, Karen worked as a compliance officer for a regional bank. Someone, and I honestly don't know who, sent her employer a video compilation of her threatening behavior, trespassing, and abuse of power. Banks tend to frown on employees who demonstrate such poor judgment and potential legal liability. She was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The final blow came when the county sheriff's office, reviewing the false report she'd filed, decided to charge her with misuse of emergency services. It's a misdemeanor that carries a fine of up to $5,000. When she was served with the summons at what used to be her HOA president's parking spot, witnesses say she simply sat in her car and stared at the paper for 20 minutes before driving away. The look on her face, according to Tom who saw it all from his driveway, was one of complete and utter defeat, as if she'd finally realized that her reign of terror hadn't made her powerful. It had just made her a criminal with a pending court date and a $5,000 fine hanging over her head.